Hey guys, Modern Day James here with another digital painting video. A few quick updates before we get started. From now until the end of the week, you can get 10% off when purchasing one of my Gumroad videos by using the offer code PRIMITIVE. This will apply to all of the videos, including bundles. So be sure to get those videos before the discount is over. I'll also be starting another semester of my mentorship beginning in July. If you'd like to sign up, you can head to brainstormschool.com, click the Mentorships tab, and then head to my Foundation Mentorship. There you'll find all the information you'll need for signing up and about the class. And if you'd like an additional resource for learning, you can use today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with more than 25,000 classes in design, art, and more. Premium membership gives you unlimited access so you can join the classes and communities that are just right for you and your goals. Whether you want to fuel your curiosity, creativity, or even career, Skillshare is the perfect place to keep you learning in 2019. I'm personally enjoying Marco Bucci's Understanding and Painting the Head series. If you enjoy the videos he puts out here on YouTube, then you'll love the tutorials he has on Skillshare. Skillshare is also super affordable. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month. You'll receive a 2-month free trial when you sign up using the link in the description below. So join the more than 7 million creators already learning with Skillshare. Today, let's begin by talking about creating edges in digital painting. The concept of an edge is actually really simple. It's just a transition between two values or colors, but the way we can execute those transitions can be quite different. There are 3 types of edges that we'll be talking about today when it comes to painting, and that will be hard, soft, and lost edges. The first is the hard edge, which is a very abrupt transition in value. I'm paraphrasing here, but I've heard Marco Bucci talk about how he equates hard edges to your storytelling edges. These are the points where you want to really drive home the message and give the viewer the most explicit information possible. But we don't want the viewer's eyes to just meander all over the canvas, so some of our edges need to be dampened down. This is where it could be helpful to soften or even lose edges, because stuffing your canvas with an overabundance of information can actually detract from the main focus of the story. In addition to that, soft edges are extremely useful in conveying roundness. With these 3 types of edges in mind, let's look at a couple of different techniques we can use to create them. Hard edges are pretty straightforward to make. Just a simple brushstroke with an opaque brush will create a very strong transition in values. If you want to maintain hard edges, you can also use lasso tools. You can soften up any quick transition in value by bringing the 2 values closer together. So even though there's no gradual transition, because the values are so similar, it appears as a soft edge. As I previously mentioned, the soft edge is a smooth and gradual transition from one value to the other. With the digital medium, it can be pretty easy to make this using the soft round or airbrush tools, but more often than not, this is the least appealing way to create a soft edge. The reason being is that it loses all possible texture, and it's far from what you'd be doing in a traditional oil painting. And that's not to say that you should never use this technique. I would just like to provide some alternatives. So an alternative measure you can use for creating smooth transitions is by using midtones. Simply put, the midtone is just the halfway point between the 2 values that you're transitioning. You can make this transition even smoother by using a greater number of halftones, but doing it this way creates a little bit more texture and grit. Another tool that you can use to transition your values is the mixer brush. This brush will act to blend your values together almost as if you were pushing around wet oil paint. And once again, what's nice about using something like this as opposed to an airbrush is that the result will have a smoother transition in values, but you'll still be able to see some of that brushwork. Don't be afraid to test out some alternative methods for creating smooth transitions. Here I'm going to use some diagonal brushstrokes with the mixing brush. There's no one correct way of creating a painting, and there's so many different ways that you can transition your values. In part 4 of this series, we'll do a deep dive into some traditional painters' brushwork. That way we can start to develop our own style of painting by studying the masters. And this final soft edge was created by using a pressure-sensitive texture brush. Alright, now that we've got some ideas about how to create edges, let's start by painting a still life. As I mentioned in part 1 of this series, shapes are crucial when it comes to making a good painting. So here I'm tracing directly over this still life to show you how I'm coming up with the shapes that I'll be painting. I start by identifying the shapes of shadow, and don't worry if there's different values of shadow, just try to group all of them together. Breaking the image down just into shapes of light and dark is the easiest way to start your painting. There are a few other shapes of value that I indicate that are non-shadow shapes, and that would be that dark value that's on the center of the glass vial. But because glass is transparent and specular, it doesn't have a regular shadow like a matte surface, so its shadow shapes are going to be a little bit more peculiar. It's at this point that you should make a judgment call about where you want the viewer's eyes to go first. To me, it was pretty obvious that the glass vial was going to be the main focal point, so that will be the point of greatest contrast and of the hardest edges. You can see in the shape breakdown that some of those shadow shapes blend together. Since a lot of those aren't going to be the main focus, those are really good areas to utilize lost edges. And just like we did in the last episode, we can start by grouping similar values together, and then if we need later, use some additional ones. I'm also once again using a very simple palette, just 5 values. You don't need too many values when it comes to doing a painting. Alright, now that I've translated that shape breakdown into a more finished sketch, let's start painting. I'm starting by using a pretty textured brush, and I'm just blocking in that background value. Unlike last episode, I'm going to work from soft to hard, which is going to make it easier when I decide to harden up some of those edges so that they really stand out. Those who asked about the last video, my layer settings are really simple. I first start by creating my line drawing on one layer, and then block in my base values on a layer underneath. Then after a few minutes, when the picture is starting to come together a bit, I merge the 2 layers together and work directly on one. A great technique that I use for hardening up some of my edges is by painting away the negative space behind it. You'll see that for the top edges of those onions and that glass vial, that I paint away the background to make a much harder edge around their silhouette. When you're painting, you never want to think about your objects as the explicit thing you're painting. You want to see it solely in the abstract. So right now I'm not painting a glass vial, I'm painting a tall shape of light and a tall shape of dark value. Here I begin chiseling away at that negative space behind the glass vial, which is going to harden up that outer edge. And although this episode isn't on brushwork, I do think it's important that your brushwork follows some sort of logic. For me, my brushstrokes are going to follow the direction of the plane of the surface I'm painting. So if I'm painting the vertical wall behind my still life, then my brushstrokes are all going to be up and down generally. But as I mentioned, brushwork is one of the most subjective parts of painting, so feel free to use whatever techniques you decide to use. As the painting progresses, you start identifying smaller and smaller shapes. You do have to be careful not to overwork a painting. I feel like the more detail you happen to scatter around the entirety of a painting, the less it becomes focused, and it looks a little bit more directionless. That's about it for this segment. Remember, if you enjoyed, please click like and subscribe with notifications on. I'm not sure subscriptions do anything anymore, but hopefully you'll get these videos. If you enjoy the content I put out here on this channel, then consider supporting on Patreon. You can get access to my premium tutorials at a discounted price, or join my group lessons. And remember, if you'd like to be part of our bi-weekly challenge, then you can do so by joining our Discord server, which the link is down below. Alright, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.